In the late 19th century, a storm was sweeping across Africa. European powers, armed with rifles, flags, and ambition, were scrambling to divide an entire continent. They drew lines on maps, signed treaties, and planted flags in lands they barely understood. Kingdoms fell. Cultures were crushed. By the 1890s, nearly every inch of Africa was under foreign control. But one nation refused to kneel. Ethiopia, an ancient kingdom with its own language, faith, and identity, stood as a mountain in the middle of a storm. And at its heart stood one man, Emperor Menelik II. In 1889, Italy had signed a treaty with Menelik called the Treaty of Wuchale, but there was a trap hidden in its words. The Amharic version simply stated that Ethiopia could choose to communicate with other nations through Italy. But the Italian version claimed something far more sinister, that Ethiopia had agreed to become a protectorate of the Italian Empire. Menelik saw the deception and rejected it. Italy, humiliated by the refusal, decided to force submission by war. Confident in their European weapons and strategy, they believed victory would be swift. Ethiopia, they thought, was just another backward nation waiting to be conquered. They couldn't have been more wrong. Menelik called upon his people. Across mountains and deserts, provinces responded. Nobles, farmers, monks, blacksmiths, men and women from every corner of the empire gathered. Ras Alula from Tigray, Ras Mikael from Wollo, Ras Mengesha, Ras Sibhat, and Empress Taitu, Menelik's wife, who brought her own troops and even commanded artillery on the battlefield. It was more than an army. It was a nation rising as one. In total, over 100,000 Ethiopians assembled, fueled by unity, faith, and the determination to remain free. The Italians, led by General Oreste Baratieri, had around 17,000 men, well-armed, trained, and confident. But they made a critical mistake. They underestimated the size and strength of the Ethiopian force. Believing a quick strike would bring victory, they divided their troops into 3 separate columns and marched into the rugged terrain near the town of Adwa. The terrain was unforgiving. The Ethiopian highlands are not kind to outsiders. Menelik and his generals knew the land, and they used it. In the early hours of March 1, 1896, the battle began. Ethiopian forces launched surprise attacks on all 3 Italian columns. Ras Alula struck from the east, Ras Mikael from the center, Ras Mengesha from the north. Empress Taitu's forces attacked and captured Italian artillery positions, turning their own guns against them. The Italians were overwhelmed. Confused by the terrain, cut off from each other and outnumbered, their formations crumbled. Ethiopian warriors, some armed with modern rifles, others with spears and swords, pushed forward with relentless courage. The ground shook with the sound of battle. The sun rose over a battlefield soaked in blood and smoke. By midday, the Italian army was in full retreat. Over 7,000 Italians were killed. Nearly 3,000 were taken prisoner. Entire units were wiped out, their generals captured. Ethiopia had not just won, it had humiliated a modern European power. But Menelik did not seek revenge. He treated the prisoners humanely. He sent a clear message to the world. Ethiopia was not a land to be conquered. It was a sovereign nation, proud and ancient, and it would decide its own destiny. News of the Ethiopian victory shook Europe. Italy's government collapsed. Riots broke out in Rome. The myth of European invincibility in Africa had been shattered. Soon after, the Treaty of Addis Ababa was signed. Italy formally recognized Ethiopia's independence. The victory at Adwa had secured Ethiopia's sovereignty, not just for a year or a decade, but for generations. Across Africa and the Black diaspora, the Battle of Adwa became a symbol of resistance. It proved that colonization was not inevitable, that African unity could defeat European guns, that dignity could triumph over imperialism. Ethiopia remained the only African nation never formally colonized during the scramble for Africa. and the victory at Adwa became more than just a military triumph. It became a legacy of courage, strategy, unity, and leadership. A legacy written not in treaties or politics, but in blood, on the highlands of northern Ethiopia. The world would remember Adwa, because on that mountain, in the heart of Africa, an empire was stopped, and a nation stood tall.